So there was a question about rabies. Partly that came up in the Corona committee thing. And let me just point out the fallacy in that way of thinking. So first of all, when somebody says, I'm not an expert on laboratory virology, or I don't know anything about laboratory virology, the first thing that should come to you when you hear that is there is no other kind of virology, because this is a situation where no human being or no psychic person has any experience directly of any virus. There is nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing to feel. You cannot say, I have an experience of a virus. The only way you can find it is through doing laboratory analysis. So if you say, I only know clinical virology or spiritual virology or emotional virology, all that is obviously nonsense. There is no other kind of virology. We wouldn't know anything at all about viruses if it wasn't for the laboratory. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is, it was claimed with this rabies example that if you have a situation where an animal, let's say, one animal gets sick, and then the next day or some hours later, another animal gets sick with the same symptoms, and then another animal, and then another animal the next day, and so on, that proves it's a transmissible cause, probably a virus. That's what they're saying. So how about this example? You have a bunch of rats in your house, and you spread out rat poison, otherwise known as Coumadin, a prescription blood thinner. So the rats start eating the rat poison, and day one, the first rat dies, bleeds to death. You can see the blood coming out of their nose and throat or mouth. Second day, another rat dies, same symptoms, etc. Third day, 2 more rats die. Fourth day, 6 rats die, and so on. Oh my God, they have a virus. Or they have rat poisoning and they just started eating them, and some of them get killed in a day because probably they eat more, and some of them maybe are smaller and got pushed out, and so they ate less and they didn't die for 3 days. There are so many examples you can think of to show that way of seeing the world is completely anti-scientific nonsense. Now, the second thing is, okay, so you see, if this is even true, and I have never seen this myself, so you see a dog and it's not doing well and it's salivating and etc. And then it bites somebody and then they're not doing well and maybe even die of a similar disease. So they used that and said that proves that it must be a virus. Hang on one second. Okay, sorry about that. Now, let's look at that. In order to prove, I was actually going to do a little demonstration, but I didn't get that together. In order to prove that something is the cause of something, so let's imagine I have a box and I have an egg, and I want to say, I want to see what the cause of this egg breaking down into little pieces is. So I take my rubber mallet and I smash the egg, and the egg breaks down into little pieces, and that proves it's the hammer. And then you can repeat that 50 times, and if you get the same result every time, and by the way, you may have wanted to see whether in that 10 seconds, the egg would have broken down by itself. In none of those 50 cases did it break down by itself. So it wouldn't have broken down. You smash it with a hammer, it breaks down. You can be pretty sure that the reason the egg breaks down is you smashed it with the hammer. Now let's do this experiment another way. You have a box, you take the egg, you throw the egg into the box, and you take a hammer and a chisel and a mallet and 10 other instruments, and you take them all and you bang it down, and then you say, see, the egg is smashed, it must be the hammer. And everybody would say, what are you, nuts? First of all, you threw the egg down first, so it was already breaking down before you started, or broken down. And then you didn't hit it with a hammer, you hit it with 20 different tools. You don't know which one of those tools did it. And you could repeat that 20 times and get the same result, but none of them mean anything, because in no case do you know what actually broke down the egg. And so if you ask the question using the same line of thinking, so is it true that the only thing in the saliva of a very sick, dying dog is a virus? There's nothing else associated with that event. There's no toxin in the saliva. There's no fear. There's no ripping flesh. There's no, highly charged emotional event. Nothing. Just there's got to be a virus. Now, here's what's interesting about it. If you go looking to see whether there in fact is a virus in the saliva of that dog, lo and behold, you don't find one. Now, how do I know that? So I actually looked into the research of whether anybody has found anything called a rabies virus in the saliva of a dog or any animal. And if you guys could just bear with me 1 minute, I'm going to be right back. Sorry about that, but I will be back in 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that. So I looked into, is there any papers showing that anybody found a virus called a rabies virus in the saliva of a dog or any animals? And I found a paper from Journal of Virology, February 1967, pages 152 to 170, volume 1, number 1, called Structure and Development of Rabies Virus in Tissue Culture. And the first line of the paper, I will read it. Quote, rabies virus particles have been studied recently under the electron microscope by various investigators who found the morphology of the virus to be variable. Working with either infected brain tissue or tissue culture preparations, they observed, in addition to bullet-shaped particles, long filaments, round, hollow cores, and round form resembling myxoviruses. This pleomorphism could have been ascribed to different morphological characteristics of various fixed and street virus strains used by these workers. It may also reflect, however, either the presence of artifacts created by excessive manipulation of the virus in the course of its partial purification. So what does that mean? It means in the previous studies, they looked for the virus and they said, oh, we found this particle, and some of them are round and some of them are filaments and some of them are hollow and some of them are bullet shaped and some of them are rod shaped, and that's the rabies virus. But the problem is a virus is supposed to be identical morphology. They're supposed to have the exact same shape one to the other. And if one is rod shaped and one is bullet shaped, then something is wrong here. It's like this analogy that I've said many times. If I go out into my yard and see if my kittens made it through the night, and I say, oh my God, there's 11 cats out there now. 2 of them have paws and fur and tail, and 6 of them have claws and feathers and go rock, rock, rock like that. And 3 of them are much bigger and they have wool and hooves and go bah like that. And you would say, this guy is crazy because those are not all cats, kittens. 6 are chickens, 2 are kittens, 3 are sheep. And you know that because they all look different. Similarly, these viruses all look different. They're not the same species. And then they go on to say, the reason this happens is, well, we don't know, or because it turns out that when you do electron microscope pictures, it creates all these artifacts because it can't make real pictures. And so never mind, we still think they're rabies viruses. All they are is that they have breaking down tissue, and the tissue breaks down into many different morphological entities, which are erroneously called viruses. And electron microscopy, by definition, creates artifacts, which is ironic that that's the only way they've ever seen these viruses in the first place. So the whole thing is anti-scientific nonsense. And so the only thing we actually know about rabies is there is no virus. So why do people get sick when being bitten by a dog or a sick animal? I mean, I don't really know. I've never seen that. And I can tell you, you don't need to know the real reason to say that that other reason isn't true. If somebody said the reason for rain is because we have thousands of elephants up there pissing on us from the clouds, and then you fly up and see no elephants, you can say very clearly, that's not the case. I may not know why it rains, but I know it's not pissing elephants. That is just an irrational way of seeing the world. Now, I can imagine that it's a whole lot of very powerful enzymes in saliva that get into your bloodstream, along with a profound fear reaction. And I can imagine that all of that might make somebody sick. But again, that needs to be looked into. And we're never going to look into these things until we get rid of the virus delusion, which prevents anybody from trying to find out what actually this is all about.